Welcome back to Kicking Kratom with yours truly, Nolan. Today I've brought my friendly spider plant. He's not going to be saying much because he's a plant. Moving on. Today we're going to be talking about everything related to cravings. Why do we get them? How do we get them? How long do we get them? And more importantly, today we are going to be talking about how to get rid of them and how to manage them. If you have ever been a child in a candy shop and you're looking at all of the sweets and your mom says that you can't have them, that is a very minor version of what you might be going through when you decide to quit kratom. It's not a supremely fun feeling. It's not a feeling we want around forever because it just gets in the way of us accomplishing our mission, which is quitting kratom once and for all. As always, almost all of the research, tips, tricks, and advice that I bring to you today are present in my book, Kicking Kratom, on Amazon. If you want to support my content, getting this book is a really good way to do it, as well as a really good way to find tips, tricks, support, and everything. Firstly, let's talk a bit about cravings. When we quit kratom, there is a part of our brains that understands that we are not supposed to go back to using it. We've set that goal for ourselves. We've said we're not going to use it. Even still, our brains, our very own brains, which we are in control of, are telling us that we should use it again. It's almost like a runaway train or a ship that you can't control that suddenly spun out of control and it's sailing off to a distant port that you did not ask it to go to. And it's one of the really confusing and rather torturous aspects of quitting, is because you want one thing, but your addicted brain wants another thing. Now, just the other day, I came across a pretty fascinating study, and a very bare bones summary is that researchers gave rats cocaine. These rats became addicted to cocaine. They shocked themselves in order to get it. What that shows us is a couple things. Number one, that the rats were getting addicted to cocaine. That's nothing special. Well, it is pretty special. Not often do you hear of rats that are addicted to cocaine. The other thing, and the thing that's important to us, is that it shows that even though we know there is harm in us using a substance, we will do whatever it takes to get it, as is the case with the rats. What it shows us is that when we have cravings, we're not doing what's in our best interests. We're doing what's in the best interest of our addiction. We need to figure out how to remain strong enough to not let our brains take control over us and what we really want. When I was quitting, I developed a couple really fun, they weren't fun because I was going through withdrawals. I managed to find a couple really fun tactics for getting through cravings and withdrawals. Number one was every single time I would think, oh man, I should probably just go and get some kratom. I would imagine that my brain and my thoughts were like a little toddler, and it was my job as the big bad parent to say no. So I would do that with myself. In my own head, I would hear a thought come up and it would say, man, you should just go to the store. Just go get some. I would loudly in my own head just scream like, no, we're not doing that. Sit back down, you're on a timeout. And that helped a lot. Because what it helped me do was minimize the importance of thoughts, these craving thoughts that I was having, and take control over them by using my executive function. So I became this observer of my craving thoughts where I could say, those are not my thoughts. I'm not having those thoughts. My brain that wants something else for me is having those thoughts. So we have one goal when we're quitting, right? It's not to use again. And it's a simple goal, but until you quit, you don't quite realize how hard that goal can actually become because your brain turns into its own enemy. So you are going to be fighting it the entire way unless you can figure out a way to befriend it or pretty much trick it into doing what you want it to do. There are a few tactics that I managed to scrounge together. One of them relied on music. There is this fascinating thing that I learned when I was studying the psychology of music, and it's called the Darling They're Playing Our Tune effect. When you listen to an amazing and moving piece of music, whether it be from your childhood or whether it be from an important and emotional event in your life, you recall that emotion that you initially felt when you were listening to that music. Whenever I would experience intense cravings, I would put my headphones in and I would play a song that mattered to me. And I would turn up the volume, not too loud as to make my ears bleed, but loud enough so that it occupied my entire headspace. And that in and of itself was such a powerful technique because it brought on these incredible emotions that completely distracted me from the craving that I was initially having in the first place. One thing that you might notice when you're quitting is that the longer you go without kratom, the less frequent these thoughts become. So in the first week, it is so important that you stay on top of those thoughts and the cravings that you're having, because they'll come like this: 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And at a certain point, they become too overwhelming and you might break and go to the smoke shop and get some more kratom. So another tactic that I learned was to just be an observer of my thoughts. So even right now, you can try it out. You'll notice that you have a voice in your head. It's saying things. It's saying, maybe I should go pick up some eggs from the grocery store. It's saying, man, what about that pile of laundry on my floor that I haven't done? Or, man, I wonder about this thing at work, or I wonder about this feeling that I had, or relationships, emotions. While you're quitting, it's so important that you learn to become an observer of those thoughts. Because if you don't find a way to separate yourself from the chaos of your own inner turmoil and find a safe space to separate to, it can be really tough. So one of the best things is just to observe your own thoughts and watch them float by, and you're not attached to any of them. So when a craving pops up, you just go, that was interesting. And that is a thought specifically that I would repeat back to myself every single time I had a craving, as I would say, that was interesting. And it helped. It really helped, because I developed this routine inside my own head where I could immediately find some sort of safe haven from the cravings that I had. This next thing is arguably the most important trick that you can get your hands on. When there's kratom in our home, we can use it. When it's not in our home, we have to go somewhere to get it. And that's harder to do. If it's right there and you're saying, I'm just not going to take it, there's a very good chance that your craving brain will say, well, it's right there and I don't want to waste the bag. Nuh-uh. None in the house. You cannot have any in the house, or your cravings will take over and they will demolish you. The next and even better thing that you can do is, if you have absolutely no way to access kratom, there is no way that you can use it. Here's a trick. On a weekend, if you decide to quit on a Friday, here are some things that you can do. Leave your house and take a walk into the woods as far as you can away from your house. Let's say that takes about 2 hours. Don't bring any kratom with you. Maybe 3 hours, maybe 4 hours if you can manage it. It's a long walk, but hey, that means that you have to walk another 4 hours home and you don't have any kratom, and there's no way for you to get it. That was one of the things that really helped me. When I was quitting, one of the things I did is, I'm not a prolific biker or anything like that, but I took my old rusty bike and I just biked all day. I left the house and I felt awful, but I left the house, biked for about 6 hours in one direction, and I had to bike 6 hours back without kratom. This leads us to our next point, which is distraction. Distraction, distraction, distraction. Distract yourself, and then you distract yourself from having kratom. Anytime a thought pops up, do something. Do anything that will distract you from that craving thought. This can be putting on a movie, going on a run, talking to your spouse, talking to your child, talking to anybody in your life that just so happens to be on hand, walking outside, picking up a new hobby. Even though these things can be incredibly difficult to accomplish when we're experiencing the anhedonia or lack of pleasure from coming off of kratom. It's so important that you maintain this inner resolve and integrity to be able to leave your house, go and exercise, and say, no, I'm doing something good for myself today. There are some mental tricks and tips that will help you reframe your cravings. And it will also help you reframe your decision to take kratom again if you're thinking of caving. One of these is, it wouldn't be so bad if I just took it this once. That is not the thought we want to have, and that thought never goes well, because as soon as we take once, we're going to take again. And there's really nothing that can prevent us from really enjoying taking it that one time and then just going back and using again. Another one is called the fading effect bias. The further away you get from your withdrawals, even though you still have cravings, the pain that you went through to get weeks away from your quit date will start to fade and it won't feel as painful as it actually was the farther away or the farther in you get to your quit. This makes it so much easier to use because you forget how much it sucked to quit. This is something that you have to remember, is remember what you went through to free yourself from kratom. Now, in my book, I have included a number of different scenarios for when you might get some cravings, why they might come up, and why you might want to use again. So what if the going gets tough? What if I want to use just once? What if I want to use in moderation? And I go through exactly how you can handle those situations every single time they come up and the best ways to deal with them. So just as an example, I don't have a lot of time, but what if the going gets tough? So what you might find is that stuff might start to suck. It's might not be the easiest task in the world to quit. And the withdrawals might be coming on heavy, and you might be feeling a little bit hopeless, a little bit depressed. What you have to remember when you're thinking about using in those circumstances again is that you don't want to repeat the cycle. Because if you let it go on like this, you are just going to be right back where you started the next time you try and quit. Take advantage of all of the fire that you were building up inside of your soul to accomplish this quit. When you decide that the going gets tough, instead of using again, try to work on that inner fire. Don't let it go out, because we have inside of each and every single one of us so much power that we can use to quit. And when you really dedicate yourself to something, like quitting, like developing a new hobby, it's fascinating just how much grit we can find that we didn't think we had. And this is the case with quitting almost more than anything that I can think of. Because we have this inner reserve of power, willpower, strength, and resistance to pain that goes completely untapped for most of our lives. And it's only when we quit that we realize that there is this inner well of power that we can draw upon and find deep within us. It's really tough to find sometimes because your entire mood is altered, you're feeling sad, lonely, depressed. But the more you start to dig in and the more you start to climb up that hill out of the pit of being addicted to kratom, the more empowering it becomes. It's like this seed of hope begins to grow in you, and you think, I am genuinely capable of doing this. And the more accomplished that sense of accomplishment you gain, the more momentum you build and the more chances of success you have in quitting because you are on a roll. Anyway, thank you so much for joining me today. As always, I have been Nolan. If you'd like to support my content and see more videos like this, you can pick up my book, Kicking Kratom, on Amazon. It's full of tips. It's not full of ticks. It's full of tips, tricks, advice, tapering guides, charts, supplements, words of advice, studies, user reports, and everything else that might be useful for you during your quit. Thank you so much, and I wish you a successful quit.